Good evening, everybody. About to get rolling. I'm going to let all of our guests in. Mute all. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the wait. I had a little hiccup that I had to look after. But we're about ready to get rolling here. I did spend some time this afternoon, I should note, looking for photos that I'd taken of Craigellachie, the one and only time I visited the distillery. Unfortunately for all of us, I can't find them. So that's unfortunate. But we got a great range for you, and my colleague Kurt Robinson is my co-host tonight. So you got Kurt and I talking everything Craigellachie to you. We have 8 whiskeys. Kurt's put the lineup into the chat. We're going to start with the kind of the core range bottlings. Well, not kind of, they are the core range bottlings. Then we're going to do some limited editions from Whiskey Sponge or single cask Whiskey Sponge and Gordon MacPhail, and then some more unusual Cragellachie's to round things out. We do have a bit of an eclectic lineup here, Kurt. Some usual suspects and some not so usual suspects. And to wrap things out, our friend Kelly Carpenter at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society was kind enough to let us bring in an advanced case of a Craigellachie that won't be launched in Canada until the fall to pour for tonight's tasting. So there you go. Before we get rolling, always we like to highlight some upcoming tastings and events. Scotch Malt Whisky Society is obviously coming up. Harmony's Mezcal and Cookies tasting, and the High West and Torveg for people who are in town. But the ones I really want to point out are, if you didn't get a sample set when they sold out the first time around, we have added more kits to our Gordon MacPhail cask launch tasting with Richard Urquhart. We're launching these 2 sherried beauties in the middle. I've got a bottle of each right here that I'm supposed to be writing tasting notes on today, but I didn't get to them. So maybe tomorrow. They are lovely. They are old, and they are very cool. We're excited about them. And there are some additional spots for that tasting. Evan improved on my initial photo, AI photo for our whiskey festival. I had an idea for like Scottish guys on a ship going to a whiskey festival, kind of like Washington crossing the Delaware, you know, that famous painting. I think this is a little better than the one I initially came up with. But if you're in town, that's going to be an awesome festival. We've got 3 whiskey festivals coming up. There's still a couple of spots for Signatory. There's still a bunch of spots for Lockley with John Campbell. This guy, we're going to be sampling the new 5-year-old release from them and 6 other whiskeys. And then the one that I'm really pumping up, because I really hope people will join this one, because I've wanted to do this for a while. I had this idea for a Glengarry Glenrothes tasting, and like the Glenrothes is just a throw-in so we can use the name. But then Evan and I started getting creative. We came up with our whiskey for closers, and we actually have a Glenrothes bottling that is spelt Glenrothes, 2 different words. I mean, everything came together on this one. It's a cool lineup. End of May, which brings us to the next festival coming up, which is our Feshiel. So not going to dwell on things post that, except for maybe, where is it here? That's in store. Ben Romick and Glenfarclas. We've got a crazy Ben Romick tasting coming up. 2 different 40-year-olds. 4 single casks, if I remember correctly. It's either 4 or 5. So baller lineup, and then Glenfarclas family casks. Where are you? Right there. I know some of you are probably feeling the FOMO because I rolled past some Springbank photos. That's an in-store tasting, and it's sold out in like 45 minutes. So just pretend you didn't see that. But you are going to want to see this one. Paul, excuse me. So that's what's coming down the pipelines. And hopefully by the next tasting I'm hosting or co-hosting here, my cough will be gone. This has been, I don't know if anyone else has had this. Apologies. This is like 2 weeks later. Post-recovery, the cough just won't go away. Anyway.
You've got a beer to keep your throat hydrated while you're going.
Yeah, that's I talked too much without a sip of beer or whiskey. and my body requires that to both stay hydrated and I suppose keep going in one way or another. Craigellachie. 8 whiskeys that we've got here. We've got a lot of work to do in front of us tonight. The distillery dates from 1890. It was a Charles Doig distillery. And thank God for Craigellachie's Instagram feed, because they've got a couple of great photos on there, such as this one here. Charles Doig was a famous distillery architect from the late Victorian era, late 1800s. Excuse me. Famously, he designed the pagoda roof that you see in a lot of distilleries. It was designed to help promote airflow in kilns. And Craigellachie was one of the first distilleries to acquire such a lovely piece of technology. God. But let's dive in. You got 8 whiskeys. Let's dive into the 13-year-old. Start things off. This is a store favorite of mine, partly for the price. The price is great on it. It's almost always on sale. It's probably going to go back on sale next week. 46%. We also love that. It's been a staple in our store since it relaunched. And Kurt, the packaging on this is pretty baller too, right? It's got like an awesome retro feel. This is one of those whiskeys where I hope they never change it.
I agree. Sick vintage look, and it's iconic throughout all their bottlings, even the crazy high ones.
Yeah. So what do we think about the nose on that? To start things off, it's like creamy. It's very fruity.
Lots of like pineapple and melon for me. It's kind of malt heavy too. It's a lot zippier, tangier than I remember too.
Yeah. Well, I haven't had a sip yet, but it's like there's a nice wood element there. Like you're getting some nice toasty notes in there to complement those really big fruity notes. It's got a little bit of a savory, slightly meaty character to it too. Apologies. Craigellachie is a distillery that's got, you know, a distinct profile. It's one of the few distilleries in Scotland that still employs worm tubs. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the back end, but it's one of those whiskeys that's been created for the blends industry to add weight to blends, to give them some body, to give them some robustness. And, you know, what they're trying to do with that is have a bit of a slightly sulfury spirit. Now, when you say that, as that spirit kind of evolves in the cask, it doesn't really stay as so much sulfur, but it becomes a profile. And a lot of people believe that the Craigellachie style of sulfur and spirit is more of like a fragrant style, as opposed to like your meaty Mortlicks. But we often see some quite meaty Cragellachie still. Like, wouldn't you say, Kurt?
Yeah, I think sherry in particular brings out that kind of umami meatiness. I think with these guys, we see more is that vegetal kind of sulfur, like when you open a tub of veggies that sat in the fridge for a couple of days, called slightly vegetal kind of thing. And it's like a heavy bread, like an unleavened bread or something.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that sort of root vegetables, because it's got an almost like glazed turnip or like you know, carrot sort of note to it too.
So we've had an absolute cakewalk of time selling this whiskey, largely because they've been so good putting it on deep discounts all the time for us, so we can pass it on to them. But considering how much love there is for it, it's a really challenging entry-level whiskey. This is not an easygoing draft. Well, this for somebody for their first time, they're probably going to be shy from it just because they're expecting acidic. But the amount of people that love it tells you that not enough people are actually challenging their palate, because most people that try it come back for a second bottle at $60 or whatever we sell it for, right?
For sure. And yeah, it's a bigger, but I mean, I think that's partly the appeal, Kirk, because like, let's talk about for a moment the sort of people that are into a whiskey like Craigellachie. They're not looking for something generally light, delicate. Like they want something that's a bit richer, that's got a bit more character to it. And let's talk about the palate for a moment. It's got, I don't know, it's like, I'd say kind of medium bodied. It's not super heavy, but it's heavy, and it's got this nice earthy mustiness, but also like lots of fruit. Like there's some nice apple tones in there, but then starting to go into some of those like pineapple notes that you noticed, or that you commented on the nose. It's bright, it's fresh, it's fruity, and there's a little bit of funk too. I mean, one of the other things we can talk about Craigellachie is they've had for a very long time a fairly long fermentation, at least by the standards of the standard industry.
Yeah, I was going to say fermenty, so I think that's exactly what you're going to there.
Yeah.
It smells like it's in that kind of breaking apart process right now, which is really cool because that's where you start to
Mhm.
notes going on and stuff. Um, I love it, and the notes that Kevin just put up there, I kind of nosed ahead through a couple. Just I always do that just to kind of acclimatize and see where I'm at when I do the first whiskey.
Mhm.
And the notes you mentioned of melon and stuff get even bigger in the next one. So I'm starting to, I kind of want to follow that through the Craigellachie OB line and see if you can see melon.
Well, and that, I mean, that's not entirely surprising. Like you'd expect those notes over time, especially if the casks are not aggressive. You'd expect those notes to sort of evolve and grow, and for that spirit to become, to move more in the direction of those big, fruity tones. Um, Great starting point. I think a good baseline for us. Craigellachie was part of a company founded by Ian Mackey, who had quite a role in the Scotch whiskey industry in the late 1800s. He started, I believe, at about the age of 25, and had quite a career in the whiskey industry before he eventually passed the distillery on to Scottish malt distillers. Craigellachie is another one of those distilleries that for a while was called Craigellachie Glenlivet. And I'm pretty sure we've seen at least one Cadenhead bottling, Kurt, where there was Craigellachie Glenlivet on the label. Sir Peter Mackey, Cadenhead loves to sort of rub people's noses in details like that. When the distillery went on, it was probably a good thing, because a lot of the distilleries that were founded in the late 1800s, a good chunk of them didn't survive in the 20th century. But it became part of one of the forebears of what would eventually become Diageo. It was a big component in the White Horse blend, along with Lagavulin. And in 1998, Diageo, what we call Diageo now, had become so big that the British trade regulator basically forced them to get rid of John Dewar and Sons, which was a blend that they owned in addition to White Horse. I think they still own White Horse, I'm not sure, but they definitely had Johnny Walker. They said, no, you own too much, you control too much of the industry. So they forced Craigellachie to sell off, or not, they forced Diageo to sell off 5 distilleries, including the John Dewar and Sons blend. And it made sense, of course, then that whiskeys like Aberfeldy and Craigellachie, which are key to that blend, be sold off. And so that's how Bacardi acquired them. It's been running them, owned them ever since. They've done a great job with Craigellachie. I think, Kurt, you'd probably agree with me. Maybe a little more frustrated with some of the other whiskeys in that stable, because they're bottled at 40 and 43%, which is often just not as interesting.
Yeah. And I think honestly, there's just not as interesting of a distillery file either. Who are we talking, Devon here? And who's buying that kind of stuff, right? Like, you buy that because you want to try it because it's a distillery, you have there's not a lot. This is kind of one of my favorites in the state, for sure.
Yeah, it's a lovely whiskey. All right, so we're on to the 17 now, shall we? Put it up here. I think we're gonna have to get Sean to take a photo of it. This doesn't look like one of ours. There was a time, and I mean, I'm hoping that we'll see it again in the not too distant future, when we also had the 23-year-old regularly available. But the 13 and the 17 are the two that we've seen, regularly in the market. And the 17 is obviously a little bit older, but I think, we can agree just from nosing, we're looking at a lot of refill casks, probably mostly ex-bourbon. it's got more of that sort of root vegetable, fruity, but also sort of, I don't know, wet leaf mustiness to it on the nose.
I like that really. It's surprisingly clean on the grains for me, which I really like. You can tell
Mhm.
it's creamier. You can tell it's kind of a big brother. That DNA is absolutely all the way through it.
It's malty, but without being like too much, especially after 17 years.
There's something that's like sort of stew like to me. Um, yeah,
Mm.
I guess stew and dumplings kind of thing going on there.
Oh, I could see that. Like it's a bit beefy when you get to the palate. You can see there, and I would even say you've even got a little bit of like that spirit sulfur kicking around. Like I think there's a little bit of it still there. There's a nice spiciness to it. It's still fruity. Um, yeah, and I think you're right. Like you can see the evolution from the 13 to the 17. Like they're they're quite similar. This is just a little softer, a little bit, rounder.
It's like Dwayne Johnson in drag. It's like this big, massive, beefy profile, but there's like a ton of pretty notes on top of it too. It's weird.
Hmm. Yeah, it's got this and like this almost like minty freshness. Like it's not mint, but something like that on the palate moving into the finish. It's very, very fresh malt. I love that. It's a pretty dram. I'm not sure if it's going to hold a candle to our cask that's coming up pretty quickly here, but for a 17-year-old bottling and one that's again often on sale, pretty good.
Yeah, I'm digging that one a lot more than I did before.
I'm trying to think when the last time I actually tried this was, because I think it's been a while.
When you go back to the 13 now, the 13's a little bit more like egg
Mhm,
creamy, kind of,
mhm.
a little bit more grainy too on the 13.
My mom used to make at Christmas time these, they're almost like waffles, but they're not. They're these very kind of fragile, hollow cookies, sort of a pastry sort of consistency. And then they get dusted in powdered sugar. I haven't seen these things in ages, but that Craigellachie 13 on the nose going back to it just makes me think of those cookies.
Should I message her and say we've got a request in for some of these?
Yeah. Well, I need her to get on her mincemeat pie too, because it's been a number of years since she's mixed up a big batch of mincemeat pie.
Mom.
Yeah. She's probably going to tell me that I've got to help make it now. Like I can't just rely on her to make it, which could be fair. Well, a couple of nice starting points to kick off there. The 13's great value. The difference, the price if you have Watchman pointing out that the 13 can be as cheap as 50 or 55 bucks at times. The 17 is pushing 200, though I think we've seen that come down to about 150 on sale at times. But it is a fair point. I mean, and this is something I think the industry is going to have to grapple with as things shake out, as they start to slow down a little bit. How do you get people to buy the 17-year-old when you could have 3 to 4 of the 13s for the same price and it's good?
Every now and then the industry goes on these little kind of tears where they try to re-educate the consumer. For a while there, it was age matters, and then it was that age didn't matter, and whatever else. I think the next thing that the industry needs to teach us all is that the pricing of whiskey is not linear with age, and so many people expect it to be. You got to think like a distillery like these guys are going to knock out probably 80% of their whiskey, if not more, at 13 years or younger. So there's not going to be a lot that sits to 17, right? Same with any other distillery. Most of what they produce is going to go up. 80% is probably going to go out the door as sub 12 year. I don't know. You're muted, buddy.
Yeah, I forgot. I didn't think people wanted to hear me blowing my nose, so I thought I'd do them a solid on that. Yeah, I agree. I've kind of made some comments about that lately in a few of my posts. There does need to be a conversation about that. I mean, you could look at something like the Craigellachie 17 and make a reasonable justification, I think, for the price at times. But you know, I think the consumer then has to make their own decision. Like, do they like it 3 times more than they like the 13? If you do, then by all means buy a bottle. Maybe you only want one. Like, to you, drinking 3 of the 13 is, not your jam. But yeah, that is something. And I mean, that's a stepping off point, because I think a number of the other whiskeys that we've got in this lineup tonight, because they're independent bottlings, are even more expensive frequently than the distillery bottled versions, because independent bottlers by and large have had to pay more to acquire casks in recent years. Whether all this will change or not, I don't know. I think it certainly should at the low end, at the younger end. But your point about what are people paying for, Kurt? I would add another layer to that, and that other layer is quality. Sometimes you get things that are exceptional and that are unique, and I don't think it's unreasonable to charge more for it. Which is not to say that like you gouge people, but we're going to go into, and I've already nosed it a little bit, our Craigellachie cask from Whiskey Sponge, and like it's exceptional, and I think it really stands out. And I think, is it inexpensive? No, but I think you can make an argument that it's reasonably good value for the age, for the quality of the spirit. Especially when you consider that as someone pointed out, that it's marginally more than the OB17, and it's older and cask strength.
And there's so much more complexity here.
Yeah.
It's custardy, it's like pastries with icing sugar or something on top. There's a ton of soft fruits into those white fruits, into those melon tones and stuff we were talking about earlier. The big meatiness behind it is really, really faint here. I get almost like a faint dandelion note too.
Yeah, the dandelion note's a good call. I mean, the other thing about this Craigellachie, Kurt, that really stands out to me is that wax. Like, it's got a waxiness that you don't often see in Craigellachie. The oak integration is lovely. This is a Craigellachie that's starting to stray into those more tropical tones, and like really start to stray into them. It's got a nice minerality to it too. There's a lot going on in this that I really like. And yeah, 20 years of age, from a single refill ex-bourbon barrel, bottled at 53.4%.
It's like a really, really naked cheesecake with graham cracker crust.
Oh yeah. Wrapped in like paraffin paper or like parchment paper, like a waxy parchment paper. Man, I love the palate on that. It's juicy, it's waxy. Like you said, there's a nice cheesiness there. There's a little bit of funk. It's absolutely beautiful. I don't know if anyone saw, I think we called it a love letter on the back of the bottle, but Angus does a kind of a unique write-up for each of the casks that he releases. And he described this one. I'm just going to read it. I don't normally like to do this, but this is a lusciously waxy and pristinely matured single refill barrel of Craigellachie single malt. It was filled in 2003, captured by us, held prisoner in a damp and boring warehouse for an undisclosed period of time, then finally bottled shortly after its 20th fill day. We englassed it, which, by the way, I love that word. We englassed it at natural cask strength without any faffing about, tomfoolery, jiggery pokery, or scandalous tinkering. It has been extradited exclusively to Canada to enjoy a laid-back lifestyle on the shelves of Kensington Wine Market, and eventually, hopefully, in your mouth. It goes on from there, but I think, I some of the best independent ballers, some of the ones we really love working with, are a little bit cheeky, and I kind of love like that cheeky side, but it's also like serious, like talking about the style and profile of the whiskey at the same time. And this one was a real treat to get to bottle.
Yeah, it's so juicy on the palate. Again, I kind of get that pineapple note, and it's almost like you take in pineapple and chewed it up with juicy fruit gum or something.
Wow. Just like luscious, creamy, waxy, tropical, cheesy. Lots going on there. Some nice spice towards the finish. It's a great single cask. you know, we get these opportunities because they're presented to us, they're offered to us. So certainly thank you to both Angus at Decadent Drinks and Igor at Heads and Tails. Without their generosity and thinking of us, we would never have had an opportunity at that particular cask. I was doing a little research on Craigellachie before we got started. I mean, I know a little bit about it. I obviously know about the long fermentations, the worm tubs, but I didn't know that much about the history. I wanted to brush up on it a little bit. Kurt and I were talking about this. Like, I've been to Craigellachie, the village in the Space Side, like a dozen times. Kurt's been there a couple times, but never the distillery. Interestingly, the people who founded the distillery also built the hotel. I don't know if you knew that or not. So there's a connection to that there, but it's an incredible little hotel with a great whiskey bar. Or no, it's the one across the street that has the really good whiskey bar, isn't it?
There's the Highlander and there's the Quake Bar in Copperdale.
But yeah, it's a quaint little village, but it's most famous for, it's called, like, the town translates to in from Scots Gaelic to English as the Rocky Hill, and it's called that because Craigellachie, the hotel, are built on kind of a rocky cliff face that looks across the River Spey towards the McAllen estate, and beautiful little stretch of the Spey River. And it's also the junction of 4 railways that lead to Aberlour, Dufton, Elgin, and Keith. The railroads to those 4 particular destinations all meet up at Craigellachie. And of course, there's a Canadian connection, which many people know. If you've ever driven between Revelstoke and Salmon Arm, or Sycamoose, actually, you've passed the Canadian village or hamlet of Craigellachie, which is where the last spike in the Canadian Pacific Railway was driven. We on this side of the pond obviously refer to it as Craigellachie because you don't know how to pronounce it. But the story behind that, for those who don't know, is that the railway was only built because at the last minute, wealthy businessmen in the Speyside area from the Grant clan actually forwarded money to finish the railway, to complete it. And the story goes, the famous story goes, after they'd wired them asking if they could get the funding to finish the railroad, the response they got back was, I believe, "Stand fast," which was the clan motto, and it meant essentially the money's on the way. So yeah, a little bit of a connection with Canada there too. Any final thoughts or final initial thoughts? We'll come back to it in the speed round, Kurt, on that sponge Craigellachie.
So I told you before we started, I really like Craigellachie. It's a distillery that's quite challenging, even quite challenging for a lot of time. I really like the 13, really like the 17 even more, and the 23 is an absolute cracker. But going to this one, there's a lot more layers than there were in the 2. There's a lot more fruit tones going on. It's a little harder to pull apart, but it's also way better integrated. I want to spend a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, I've spent a lot of time with it. It's one of the few whiskeys to come into the store in the last couple of years where I've already almost killed off a bottle of it, which is, I mean, Kurt, you know what it's like. It can be hard when you have too many things around you that you can dip into. It can be very hard sometimes to finish a bottle, but I've put a serious dent into a bottle that I brought home about 3 or 4 months ago. So let's try something different. This one was a bit of a surprise. We weren't expecting it to come into the market. It's another 20-year-old Craigellachie from Gordon MacPhail. James Bourne, who's with Authentic Wine and Spirits, was texting me about this earlier today because he was not able to take part in the tasting, or was not planning to take part in the tasting anyway. But he thought it was relevant for people to know that this cask was initially offered to a US customer, presumably a retailer. They rejected it. Gordon MacPhail offered it to them at a good price. And the way Gordon MacPhail operates is they identify what they believe to be good casks. They bottle them, put them in boxes, and then they figure out who they're going to offer them to. Whether it's going to be something that's just part of their own range that they sell to markets around the world, or whether it's going to be a market exclusive or a retailer exclusive cask. And this one was offered to Canada. As James said, it was offered at a pretty good price as well. So 2002 vintage, 58.5%, refill ex bourbon barrel, bottled for Canada. Kurt, what do we think about this one?
Kevin seems to be tracking really close to my palate. Not just tonight, but the past couple tastings we've done together. His coconut water, and he said sugar water. I actually, as soon as I pulled it to my nose, I thought it was a little bit like dishes. Got that little bit of dishwatery kind of thing, and I can absolutely see the coconut water. But it's entirely pleasant. I get some licorice, like red licorice behind it, not black licorice. I still get some of those pineapple tones, almost like flambe.
And it interestingly, it's got that malt note that the 17 had too. It's very sugary. Yeah, Kevin's note on that. Like, in my mind, there was something like almost like a refined sugar. And there's some nice nutty tones in there too, like macadamia nuts, white chocolate.
It's a lot more spice driven than ours is too. Ours is way fruitier, I think, and ours has that slightly tangy grapefruit note towards the back end. This one doesn't have quite the same leaning into tropicals kind of thing going on. Very, very cereally, which is kind of my jam. I like being able to taste the distillate. I like being able to taste the ingredients. So it's kind of naked. I don't think it's a rock star, but this is my style of whiskey. This is what I would happily drink in it. $200 for a 20-year-old.
210, 215, was that what it said? 215. It's interesting to me because it seems almost like an elevated version of the 17. It's more like the 17 than our cask, and it's kind of more concentrated. It is more going a little bit more tropical than the 17.
It's a good call. They're quite close. Not only a little bit more tropical, it's also a little bit creamier.
Mm-hmm. So your spice note's great too. Like there's tons of spice on the on the palate. I'm surprised this is refill bourbon because like that level of toastiness and spice is really quite prominent. Like whatever that cask matured previously, it probably didn't mature it for long because this is like really fresh, toasty, and spicy.
I bought one of these, but I kind of think I might buy a second one. It's easy. It's a cool whiskey. There's a lot of character. There's nights when I don't want to think about whiskey, right? You're probably the same. You're happy to pour, a tumbler or something and not stick your nose in the glass even once. But having said that, I still have taste buds and I don't want to drink water just for the sake of an easy drink. I still want something with character. This would be that. You don't have to overthink it. It's got character.
But a lovely bottling nonetheless.
Did somebody say banana on that one earlier? Is that this one we were referring
to? I'm not sure.
I get a little bit of like banana candies, those kind of marshmallowy, chewy kind of banana palette.
Or like Peeps.
Well,
I haven't tasted one in like probably 30 years, but just the smell.
Man, I remember giving those to my kids because they love them. And like having to pick them out of places like in bits of the carpet and shit, and those things sticking to your hands. And been traumatized by it.
It's no good.
Nice note, banana yogurt.
All right. Next up, we've got the Dumangin. This is the Dumangin Craigellachie, 2007. So Dumangin is a champagne producer that we work with. Gilles Dumangin, who's, I believe, fourth generation of his family in the industry, also makes a style of fortified wine called Ratafia. And the best way to think of it would be something like Pinot de Charente is the closest approximation. It's essentially grape juice and brandy. So they're not fermenting the grapes. They're just taking that sweet, fruity juice and adding grape brandy to it. And then in Gilles' case, he's actually maturing that in oak. And he is selling his Ratafia, but he's primarily making Ratafia to season casks that he can then put whiskey into. And the reason he started doing this was because way back when he sampled a whiskey from Glenmorangie called the Hermitage, which was also matured in a ratafia cask way back when. And it gave him the idea to start seasoning casks, but then also maturing whiskey in them. So he's buying whiskey from distilleries in Scotland, Ireland, the US, France. I think he's done Canada as well. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to double check that. But he's buying whiskeys from around the world to mature them. He's having them sent to France, to his winery, where he's further maturing them in his own casks. I think if he got to the attention of the SWA, they would probably prevent him from naming the distilleries, but thankfully it hasn't got to that point yet, and hopefully it won't. But this is his packaging. One of the things I love about it is that it's pink. I mean, who doesn't love that? I mean, there's probably a lot of stodgy old gentlemen who don't like the fact that there's a scotch in a pale pink box, but what are you going to do? So this is 12 years old, initially matured in a hogshead, finished for 15 months in a ratafia champenois cask, non-chill filtered, bottled at 48%. This is my first time trying this. Some of these Dumangin casks have been great. Others have been a bit challenging. Kurt, I know you're not a wine cask guy, but I don't know if this actually is like this. Is this the same as an actual wine cask? Because these are ratafia casks, which is slightly different. But I'm curious for your take on this one.
It's kind of whiny, but it's not whiny in the sense that I complain. Wine is. The thing that always bothers me with it is, quick and dirty. I think those casks get storage to low alcohol product. What's left in there continues to ferment, and we put whiskey in it. It's funky. That leaves a really nasty finish to it. It always lingers at the top. Just can't get nasty. It's all done. This tastes kind of like a dessert wine in some ways. It's got like a lot of sweetness and stuff going on, but it doesn't leave that shitty aftertaste. It doesn't have that weird sour wine to it. It's whiny without being bad.
But I wonder if that's because what's actually happening in a wine cask is that wine is often fermenting on lees in the cask. That's not what's happening here. You just have effectively grape juice and brandy mixed together and put into the cask. So maybe you're getting a slightly different effect. The nose is a little strange. Like I'm getting like strawberry Twizzlers and cinnamon hearts, but also like goat cheese. And I remember doing tastings with Crystal where at one point in time I'd be like, yeah, that was that goat. She'd be like, you can taste the difference. And you could, based on where that animal grazed, like whether it was a valley cow or like a meadow or something like that. I would guess that this particular goat cheese was from a goat that was grazing in the hills, is what I'm getting on those.
Which farmer fed it?
I don't know. I just hope it wasn't going to someone's garage abattoir in Edmonton, which is a reference to local news recently that may or may not have caught your attention.
Great cover for getting rid of bodies. Anyway, this is it's weird and funky. It's got a note to it, and I kind of like, okay, I get a lot of sour fruits and everything, and just as I'm pulling away, it pulls me back. It's oddly specific here, but the yellow packaged, no name brand superstore beef ramen pack. When you just open that seasoning pack from inside, there's that weird, slightly meaty, slightly, I don't know, kind of artificially thing going on with the flavor.
Is it umami?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
This is like it's like a child had a pack of those Swedish berries, but also chocolate chips in the backseat of their mom's car. And like it's a hot day. And the chocolate and the Swedish berries and maybe some dirt and other things have kind of mixed around a little bit.
Still fermenting.
Definitely fermenting. I like the finish on it. It's got some nice spices. It's fruity. It's different. I mean, some people might like the fact that there's some nice sweet layers of fruit there to it and it's candied. But but it's not so over the top that it hides the distillate. Big Turk is a really good call, Darren. I like that note.
I just got excited when I saw that too.
My brother used to love Big Turk. I didn't like it as a child, but I don't even know if you can buy them anymore. But I think I'd be able to appreciate it now, as a mature adult.
As an older adult, not necessarily mature.
Yeah,
that's a weird one for me. I don't dislike it, but I don't like it either. I think I would happily drink a dram if somebody's pouring it for me, but I wouldn't probably ask for a second.
That's fair. I think we can all agree that's fair. All right. Next up, Cadenhead, Craigellachie, from the small batch. Let's pull it up. Or no, original collection. How old? Like we haven't had small batch in how long? Way too long. Okay, here we go. 15-year-old, and this is out of stock now. Boo. 100% port cask matured. So not even finished. This is apparently port cask matured Craigellachie 15-year-old from Cadenhead. What's the verdict here, Kurt? What are you thinking about this on the nose?
It's nice to see that it's not just a big port dump where it's like nearly coffee colored and Ribena or something. Right away, as soon as I stuck my nose in it, it was kind of like yogurt covered raisins or yogurt covered cranberries or something. A lot of creaminess, like white chocolate almost. It's still got that sour tang to it. It's still got that kind of vegetal sulfury slate note to it. I can absolutely see it being Craigellachie. I wouldn't guess a port cask on the nose, and I haven't tasted it.
I mean, I'm not sure I would guess it based on the nose, but it does have some of the hallmarks that I find in port cask whiskeys that I like. Sulfur raisins. It's got like this milk chocolate thing, like caramel. But Kurt, when you said blueberry, and instantly I'm like, oh no, it's those chocolate covered acai berries. You ever had those before?
Brookside Farms.
Bag at Costco.
Where's Jeff Surja? He was here, and I told him I really like those. Maybe he'd send me a bit. Come on, man. Where are you?
He's probably at another tasting tonight. That's what happened 2 Thursdays ago. And he watched from the bar for like the first hour, and then he had to go to his other tasting. But those chocolate covered acai or blueberries on the palate still there. It's meaty and leathery. Kurt, I agree with you. I'm not sure I would have picked this as even on the palate. Like it's a little bit whiny, but I'm not sure I would have nailed this as a port cask.
It's a little bit flat and dead though. It's almost like all the top notes have been shaved off. Like if you're EQing, you kind of turned your treble way down or something.
I'd agree with you first sip. The second sip though seems to really light up, like tons of sugar, like demerara sugar, cold tea, dark chocolate, but also getting into like some barbecue and like beef jerky on the palate too.
Cold tea is a great note nose too. Cold black tea. Paul's correcting you. Acai berries. Yeah, I agree, Darren. It almost smells like there's like a tick of peat in it or something.
Interesting. I mean, you wouldn't expect that from Craigellachie.
But you know the way Cadenhead manages their casks, like they don't at all. Just dump shit into wood and see what happens. Basically, I'm pretty sure.
At least
like,
that's what they do now. Or although I think Cameron and Jenna have been a bit more on the ball in recent years, but yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there'd been something in it previously that had a bit of peat. Maybe it's an old cask that had some really dead old spirit that had once been peated or something.
Yeah.
I don't think the spirit itself is peated, but maybe something from the wood.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? This could be a refill port cask. That might be why we're not finding it super porty on it, but I don't know. It seems rich enough that I'd be surprised if this cask had been used previously.
I don't mind that. I didn't expect to like it as much as I do. I think the palate is better than actually spending a lot of time with it. It's actually quite easy to drink. I don't think I would geek out on this one. watching a football game or something, I could do that.
And it's too late because it's sold out. So unless you got one, spilled milk and such. All right, the next one, which this is the Great Dram's Craigellachie PX cask. This one's a bit of a curiosity because I mean, I'll put the photo up. It kind of looks like it's got you know, color to it, but maybe that's just the bottle. The whiskey's paler than a lot of the other ones in tonight's lineup. 56%, 10 years old, matured in a PX sherry cask. What are your initial impressions on this one, Kurt?
Creme brulee, sour fruits, and cognac, actually, or Armagnac or something.
I got like mid-range hotel body lotion. Like not a really fancy hotel. And you know, now they don't give you the little lotions. You got to use the communal one and it makes sense, like plastic and waste and all those things. But yeah, I think it's very kind of floral and almost slightly perfumed to me on the nose.
I get a lot of like artificial peach or artificial apricot notes or something on the nose too. Like not real fruit, but something that's trying to be.
Like IKEA incense.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know if they sell incense at IKEA, but if they did, I imagine it would be like this. It would not be so offensive. It would be kind of like toned down incense.
Or anything in the IKEA cafeteria. You know, it's like pseudo food, I think.
And it smells, there's like a baked cookies, like not like quite like shortbread, but something like that, like sugar cookies.
Those thumbprint ones with the maraschino in them.
You mean Jammy Dodgers?
No, like they're kind of like that in a way, but they're like it's almost like a shortbread sort of deal that you poke your thumb into, put like nuts on it typically, and there's a bit of maraschino or something in it. It's like a grandma cookie. Oh, Kevin just bought Jammy Dodgers the other day. I was in Superstar, and there's like a limited edition run right now. They don't say Jammy Dodgers on the here, but there's like all berry ones, the like cookies themselves, even are bright pink, and a whole bunch of different kinds. I almost feel the cart full to try them.
The palate.
I quite like that. It's slightly floral. I didn't expect that profile when I saw it was PX cask at all.
It's back to that vegetal, but like a even more intense vegetal note, like from the 13. I'm getting like sauteed carrots and turnips here. It's quite spicy. This has got to be a refill PX cask. Like there's no way this is a fresh PX cask. Unless they like STR'd it or like rinsed it before they put like hot water steam rinsed it. Cause it just, the sherry's not really coming out that much. It's more.
Unless could it have been like a really, really short seasoning on a cask? Some PX spirit in it. PX.
Like 10 minutes.
A little bit.
It's like it's the equivalent of the Murray McDavid what do they used to call it? Aced. They aced the cask with sherry. So it spent like a couple of weeks in there at most.
So I'll tell you something I do when I'm dealing with younger whiskeys like this and stuff, and things that are slightly more aggressive to get a proper kind of feel for them. You know how they say those cheesy things like every second or every year of whiskey deserves a second on the top. When we have a really good old beautiful whiskey, we tend to spend more time on the palate. When they're young and fiery like this, after I've had a first proper sip and nosing, I'll take a bigger sip and literally let it sit on the tongue for maybe a second and swallow it down. And if it doesn't get grippy and if it sits okay, I kind of think it's an okay whiskey. That's kind of the test I'll do. And this one, like I just took a decent mouthful of it, let it sit for a sec, swallowed it. It's actually quite rich. It's quite easygoing. It doesn't have any of that wininess that I thought I'd get there. It doesn't seem undeveloped there. I don't think it's a bad age for this one to be bottled. I like it.
So I tried this a while ago, and was not impressed with it when I first tried it. And that might have been, there might have been a bit of my being angry that it was $170 or whatever it is, $173 for a 10-year-old. Um, it also might have opened up since, like, you know, a lot of whiskeys do benefit from a little bit of oxidation, like letting the bottle open, letting it breathe a tiny bit. Um, I like this better than I did when I first tried it. When I first tried it, I'm like, oh, that's dreadful. It's not dreadful. It's actually quite nice, but it is frustrating that it's priced where it is because the price is kind of crazy.
It's like banana cream pie, and those when you were a little kid. Remember when I see there's a lot of older guys in this group, so we're safe territory here. When you went to school and they had hot dog days, and you could get those like little ice cream things with the little wooden spoons you'd eat it off of. I kind of get that like ice cream with wooden spoon thing going on here, and banana cream pie.
Mm. When you started talking about hot dog days, I don't remember those, but I remember like Texas Donut Day for some reason. Like Kurt, we're same vintage. Calgary, was that a thing at your school or was that just my school?
Yep, we had them here. But I moved around a lot, so I did Calgary 3 times. I was in Manitoba, places, but most of my formative years in BC. So I got to see all the great culinary um, Western Canadian experiences. Basically, they all consisted of pizza days, hot dog days, and donuts. So
Yeah. All right. The next one is a society bottling, which um, I'm trying to find online because uh, this has not been released in Canada yet. Did I find it? Uh, bizarrely, only on YouTube, or not on YouTube, on Liquor Connect. Well, at least we'll get a photo of the bottle there. So this is the bottle. It is coming in. We'll put her up on screen here so you guys can see him. I think I get to click on the image, don't I? Let's see here. I don't know how this works. All right. Well, anyway, so Scotch Malt Whisky Society bottling, a future release in Canada. What have we got here? Ex-bourbon initial maturation, finished in a first fill fourth char hogshead. And the ABV on this is 60.1%, 18 years of age, 2005 vintage. Yeah, this this is what we're sampling. Kelly was kind enough to let us give a preview of this whiskey here. That's what it'll look like when it comes out. Admittedly, it's not a great photo, but I don't think Liquor Connect is just always known for having the best photos on it. Kurt, what do we think of this one?
I like it despite myself. Um, I actually really like this. I'm not happy the society is doing these second fills and kind of tomfoolery and what was it, jiggery pokery you said earlier. Um, the society was always about like cask strength whiskey, naked, natural, all this kind of stuff. Uh, but you can't argue with results.
Yeah.
I like it. I like the complexity on the nose, on the palate. There's some cool, like almost burnt cherry notes. There's still that funkiness and sour, footy, cheesy, sulfury kind of vegetal thing going on behind it.
Mhm.
I'm fermenting a ridiculous, nice little jar full of peppers right now, some habaneros and all kinds of stuff in there. And there's something as soon as I stuck my nose in this, that had that kind of same fermenty spiciness coming up.
Mm.
Quite cool.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, like my initial impression was like orange creamsicle and like Starburst fruit candies.
I was going to say somebody just posted those notes in the chat. But yeah,
Yeah, they did. It's true. Um, I'm gonna try to look up the price on this when it's coming, but man, the palette on that is lovely. Sorry, I wasn't really thinking about it when I took a sip, but it is very orangey. Lots of those like waxy Starburst fruit candy notes. Maybe going a little bit tropical, like kind of quince paste and apricot jam.
it's kind of Glenmorangie-esque with a bit of cheesiness and footiness in it. It's
Mhm.
got like none of those syrupy fruits like Glenmorangie used to do. And I agree. Despite the cask aggression, and I'll be honest with you, I think virgin oak might be less favorable to me than wine casking.
Mhm.
But despite 60%, it's still a fairly soft drink, despite big cask too.
So this is a black label bottling from the society. The price on it, at least as I have it listed now, unless something changes between now and when it's released, is $300, which is a little on the dear side, but I have to say this is a lovely cask. Like it is. I'm with you, Kurt. Like, why would you finish something in virgin oak that's already got a bit of age behind it, but it's pretty good.
That's I'm speculating it was probably sitting at 17 plus years and was probably a ridiculously tired but quite spirit. So they had to reinvigorate it. Either
Well, and I suppose
doing pain or
one yeah, one thing we probably, I mean, God, the mouthfeel on that is big. And someone mentioned smoky before. There's almost something a little bit smoky about this on the finish to me too. Like it's probably just that char, that fourth level 4 char. But man, Kurt, is that a Stanley mug that you have there? I have to ask.
I'm not one of those numpties. Sorry, if anybody is one of those numpties. It's my wife's Starbucks.
I only learned about these and that people were like really hot under the collar for them recently. So
I don't
I'm not hip with the kids as it is.
like they're so expensive for a cup. What's the story? I'm missing something
Well,
here.
because if your car burns and the mug's inside it, it might survive.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Well, that's valuable.
and the water might still be cold after they put the fire out. I think that's the appeal to them. I don't really know. I had to get my wife and daughter to try to explain it to me, and it still didn't stick. But you know,
So my daughter has one. It was given to her as a gift. And on the top of the straw, there's a little miniature version of the cup itself. So there's like this big one and then a little tiny one at the top of the straw. I'm like, what the hell am I looking at?
is
What
that the
is this?
cap?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so ridiculous.
so funny. Anyway, well, back on track here. I quite like this. I mean, the price is high. I'd like you, like, why would they finish it? It probably was cool before. But what I was going to say about the society is I think there's an element of they're trying to give their consumers what they want. And I think a lot of their consumers want things that have the richness of sherried whiskeys. And by and large, I think most of the finishing they're doing has been done well. But, you know, Kurt, we're of a different breed. You and I we like these whiskeys like that sponge Craigellachie that are quite naked and they're kissed by the oak, but the oak is not the only thing in play. And that's perhaps not mainstream. Mainstream wants things that are a bit richer.
And you might agree with this or not, Andrew. Um, the age we live in right now is fascinating. We're watching stuff unfold. Later generations are going to talk about whiskey. There's lots of stuff in. And right now it kind of sucks to be us in some ways, but at the same time, there's a lot of interesting stuff. But because the style that you and I typically look for, Andrew, has become sort of it's so fleeting to find it nowadays. I'm looking anywhere I can for things that are just interesting and fun and hit the palate right. I don't care. I'm finding wine casks that are interesting occasionally. I'm finding things like this that I never would have looked at and going, wait, there's something different about this. There's something funky about this. I really like this one. I don't think 300 is unreasonable if that's what the key is. I like it.
Mm-hmm. But 245 for the KWM whiskey sponge Craigellachie is, I mean,
No
that's
brainer.
all right. Time for the speed rounds. We're going to go back through our range of 8 whiskeys, see how they've evolved and changed in the glass, and then we're going to have a vote. So, Kurt, back to the Craigellachie 13.
It's creamier now. There's more heavy malt tones. I get a little bit of like almost mojito that's been left in the glass too long.
Dried apricot.
That's good now. Slightly composty now too.
The palate tastes like, how is the rest of the industry going to justify charging $200 for 13-year-old whiskeys when you can buy this for $55 to $75 a bottle?
That's a big dram.
No. Really good. God, it's almost painful that is that good for the price, because it makes it hard to justify things that are more expensive, but it is very good. So
There are still some deals out there.
there are still, well, we talk about this, like, I mean, increasingly with both importers and producers, I'm asking them, like, why do you think the market should pay X when they can buy examples of things like this, like Ben Romick 10, like Aaron, like, you know, Bodega Sherry Cask, all these great things that are well under $100. How can you justify those prices when consumers have these choices at their hands?
Man, like if Anok took their 12-year-old up to 46%, I would
Oh
be a
man.
kid. But even at 40%, that's $60. It's a no-brainer.
One, and same problem with the Pulteney 12, like, which is a great whiskey. Like, God, it would be so much better at 46, but it's still like, it's punching way above its weight. We recently did a tasting with some Speyburns in it, and well, we did the sherry though. Kurt, one of the ones I think you missed out on was our Quinceañera tasting, which was our sherry cask 15-year-olds, and the Balblair and Speyburn 15, like another couple of great examples of things that are respective to the rest of the market, very, very well priced, and you know, gonna make it hard. Like, there's choices out there. So if your consumer's getting mad, all we're saying is there's other choices out there. Don't get too mad. Vote with your wallet. I believe that's how you can affect change.
And whiskey geeks, your time is coming around real quick here.
Mhm.
Over the next couple of years, you're going to be able to make out like bandits if you're liquid.
I think the 17 has improved with a little bit of time in the glass. It's more floral now. Some nice soft fruity tones. It's mellowed lovely. I really dig that. I would probably take that over the 13, but I don't know. But there is a bit of a price difference there.
I think we're seeing part of the reason why the 17 is so. You just said it. Watchman said it's doing really well. I agree. There's a point where you've got enough whiskey open that you don't need another bottle for the sake of having a cheap bottle. You want something that's a little better. I know it's a fairly drastic jump in price, but to me, the two of them side by side now really shows you just how much richer the 17 is.
Yeah, I mean, when it's good, with greater age, you're paying for something that's often a bit more elegant, a bit more complex. It doesn't mean it's better, it's just different. And you know, we get carried away sometimes. I say this all the time. I've been spoiled in what I've had a chance to drink over the years. But yeah, like when you're looking at those things, it can be better. But I mean, Kurt, we can talk about this too. Like, just because it is older doesn't necessarily mean it's better. But I think in this case, it is a bit of a bump up. All right, Whiskey Sponge, Craigellachie. I pulled. I don't know what you think about the lineup, but I set the lineup completely blind tonight based on how I believe things would show. Do you think we roughly got the trajectory right there? There might be one or two out of place.
It was a good way to unroll it in terms of being able to bounce flavors and everything without having heavy things come first.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of quality, though, the sponge sits way further back in the lineup for me, like where you put your better malts towards the back. But the flip side of that is we've talked about this a lot of times. You want the really good ones when your palate's sort of fresh too. So when you're trying to showcase something that's good to have early, this whiskey punch is way up. Speaking.
Well, that's just it. It is I wanted people to sample this while it was when it's going to show its best in the lineup. And I think if you put this after that Great Drams Craigellachie, which is not as sherried as I thought it was going to be, but it's still pretty spicy, or after that Port Cask matured Craigellachie, it's not gonna show as well, and that's why I threw it up at the start there. And even the Gordon MacPhail one that follows this is quite a bit spicier and nuttier. It still drinks really well. For me, I think it's going to be a hard one to beat in this lineup, but man, I'm digging that one.
Yeah, beauty.
Gordon MacPhail.
It's showing better second time around, on the nose at least.
Oh, the palate as well. It's still quite nutty and quite spicy, but I love it. It's like fresh cracked walnuts, pecans, and there's this nice buttery toastiness moving into the finish. I think there's like a bit of a tropical tone in there too, but that's a great cask. Rejected by America, hopefully loved here in Canada because it is quite tasty.
It doesn't have a ton of personality. It just has a lot of quality. Makes sense. It's not unique, like easy to identify or anything like that, but it's exactly what I want right now.
Yeah, no, it's a great cask. Dumangin. Oh man, that is like Ichiban, like a fresh pack of Ichiban noodles with the powder, maybe just at that moment that you pour the hot water in.
100%. That to me takes us into somewhere between Craigellachie and closer to more like.
I actually think it's improved on the palate with time. It's a bit of a weird one. Like strawberry Twizzlers, licorice nibs, and like, I don't know, teriyaki beef jerky and Ichiban all at the same time. But I don't know, it's kind of odd and I like it.
I think the palate is improved. I get a little bit of eau de vie on the palate too. I don't think the nose is improved for me. I think that umami note is kind of throwing me for a little bit, but the palate is quite drinkable.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Great Drams PX 10-year-old. This one, in retrospect, probably should have been before the Dumangin.
But it probably shows better for it. Now we're nice and creamy and custardy again. Melting vanilla ice cream. A little bit of burnt tire back in there somewhere too.
There's like a rubbery latex tubing thing going on there. The finish on that thing is so long. It's like coating, oily, and drying at the same time.
I know you're mad at the price on that one, Andrew, but I quite like that one. I don't. That one's like 170. You said.
Yeah.
It's a high price.
72 or 173.
It's a high price for sure. But I like it. It's a roller coaster. Yeah. That's probably the surprise of the night for me. The last two.
Dude, it is for sure the surprise of the night for me because I was expecting it to be, I don't want to say dreadful, but I just thought it was not great when I tried it the first time. But there's other Craigellachies we could have put in the lineup, but I intentionally chose not to because we'd featured them in other tastings, and I wanted this to be mostly a range of new whiskeys. But yeah, it definitely exceeded expectations. Okay. Last but not least, a Forage into Orange. It's not even here yet.
That palette is awesome.
And yeah,
I really like this one, man. This is not my style of whiskey at all. Like I said, maybe it's just me hunting for different things, but this one's working on all fronts for me. It's spicier than I typically like. It's more kind of artificially than I typically like. It's everything about it is not my style, but I love
it. It's not as I don't think it's as elegant as the Sponge or the Gordon MacPhail, but the palate on it is really, really tasty.
It's cool. Oh, so I'm tracking really close with Kevin, but I'm also seeing a lot of Watchman says here too. Because maybe it was aged in rye casks. Actually, I'm sure it wasn't, but it actually does kind of have notes of that.
Yeah, that kind of rye spiciness.
Mm-hmm. I'm back to those fermented habaneros.
Hmm. Kevin prefers the Dumangin. Interesting. Well, I mean, a lot of this goes to show you it's all about personal taste. And it can also be about the night you try it. I mean, I talked about this. We had a tasting on Tuesday. I don't remember what it was. Oh, yeah, it was the Compass Box tasting. And there are whiskeys that I try one day and I'm like, yeah, it's okay. And then I try it on another occasion and maybe the climate's different. Maybe it's more humid. You know, maybe I'm better rested or my palate is more fresh. Uh, and things taste a little differently. I mean, I know for a fact that sponge Craigellachie has been great every time I had it, but you know, people are going to like different things on different occasions, and they're going to like different things, which is great too. So let's trigger the poll. I think I prefer the Dumage. Okay, Kevin preferred the Dumage over the Great Drams. Gotcha. Regardless, I'm going to fire up the poll here. So Evan did not ask a cheeky third question, which I'm kind of disappointed about. That's one of those little Easter eggs that I've come to love. Like, what strange observation on the store, the industry, tastings, or myself has Evan chosen to highlight tonight? But I think it's because it was a short time frame. We had a short turnaround to get tonight's tasting email off to people. But while they're figuring that out, Kurt, while they're picking their favorites, I know we're more charitable with ourselves. We allow ourselves to have 3 favorite whiskeys. I'm going to put you on the spot, Kurt, to kick things off here. What were your 3 favorites from tonight's tasting?
Okay. So favorites, the qualifier. Sometimes it's just the one I want to spend the most time with right now, but generally they're the one I think is the best too. Number 3, the Great Drams. I think I prefer the 17 slightly to it, but I've had the 17 a lot. I want to spend more time with this one. I'm really digging how vibrant it is. I didn't expect it at all. Very cool. Number 2, that SMWS bottling. I love the richness of it. I don't know, man. That's dessert on steroids for me, and I'm not a dessert guy. I really, really dig it. I'm looking forward to that one coming in. Way out of left field. And then I honestly didn't know if I was going to like this one the best because there's some fun ones in here, but our sponge for me, I don't know. There's a lot of notes going on there. It's variegated wool, if you will. There's like a ton of colors coming, a ton of flavors. I like the juicy syrup texture of it. I like the tropicalia that's going on there. There's a lot with that. We were really lucky. That's all I can say.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, to me, this is kind of a hard lineup to pick. Maybe not my number 2, because I'm with you on 1 and 2. The sponge is without question my favorite whiskey in the lineup. The Society bottling is without question my number 2 in the lineup. But I'm really struggling with my third, and my choice is slightly different from yours. I'm torn between the 17 and the Gordon MacPhail. But I think I'm going to have to go with 17 for my third, for solely the reason that you've talked about this or alluded to this a few times tonight during the tasting. I think that's a whiskey that I could happily drink and not like be, kind of troubled by it. Like I'm not gonna be forced to, it's excellent, but I'm not gonna be forced to think about it. I'm not gonna be like, oh, should I have put this in a different glass? I'm just gonna pour a measure of it and I'm gonna enjoy it. So I think for that reason, the Craigellachie 17 is the number 3 for me.
I kind of think we all get there. You know what I mean? I think we get to that point where we know our shit. We know there's times we want to get nosing. That's why we do these tastings and stuff. We want all the details. There's other times when you just want to like chill. It's been a long day, but still. That's this one to me. I think it's perfect for that.
Yep. All right. The votes are in. Here are the results. Sponge Craigellachie has won by a landslide. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna say I'm not surprised, but I mean that's a pretty strong showing for it. The Society bottle finishes number 2 in the first round, and the G&M finishes narrowly in third. And then second favorite, look at that. Craigellachie 13, three-way tie between Craigellachie 13, the Sponge, and the Society bottle. Uh, I mean that's reality, right? Like, Kurt, you were talking before, we haven't done a tasting together in a little while. You've been busy with other stuff. Great to have you on this tasting tonight. But like we've talked about whiskeys like Glenfiddich 12 before, where when you actually sit down and give it a reasonable chance, you're forced to admit like how decent it is for what it is. And it's good to see that, things like that Craigellachie 13 stand out for people because they're like, yeah, it's pretty good for the price.
Whiskey's expensive, and I'll blow smoke up your ass for a minute here, Andrew. I get to tell people all the time that, when they come in and they're blown away with the shop, that we're lucky there's been a business model that's been built here where people can come in and it's like trying on shoes, right? Where you don't have to spend a ton of money and walk out not knowing if it's right. So you can come in, you can try these things, and we're lucky we can do that because I think ultimately whiskey is bloody expensive nowadays. So any chance you get to try it before you buy it, thing, it's nice knowing, and it's kind of comforting knowing that out there somewhere are still 50, 60, $70 bottles of whiskey that you're okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how we reached a point where hardly anything interests me if it's less than 2.
I'm Kurt, you and I are in the same boat on this. I've neglected one thing tonight. I neglected Facebook, and Mark Watt from Watt Whiskey has been commenting all night. And he's got a ton of comments in there, which is kind of cool, but echoing a lot of the things that we've said along the way here. And Mark used to live not far from Craigellachie Distillery. He grew up near there. I remember the first time I had a Cadenhead meeting with Mark in, I think it was in Dufton. He was living in Dufton at the time, and it was the Cadenhead World Headquarters, and it was basically just a room in his house filled with bottles. It was before he'd moved to Campbellton. Anyway, great dude, Mark. Thanks for tuning in and watching the tasting tonight. Yeah, Kurt, I think, we're a business. We're there to make money, but we also love whiskey. And I like to think that we have a reputation for not steering people wrong. And
dude, look what we do here.
yeah.
How many times do we beat the shit out of whiskeys? We're pretty brutally honest sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Where some of our notes are not friendly, and we know it.
No, I mean, again, going back to Mark's comments that he said on the thing there, he said, I think he said one of the what is it? Haha, best tasting note I've ever heard was one of the ones that he threw into the chat there. I mean, we're honest, but it's from a place where we genuinely care about the industry. We want to see it do well. We want to see it succeed, but we also want to see customers treated with respect. We also want to see customers valued. And some of the industry, not all, but some of the industry, I think, has lost sight of this in what they kind of saw as a gold rush and an opportunity to make money. And I've been, maybe not as publicly as I should have, but Kurt, like, I've been like fucking chicken littling this thing for how many years now, where I'm like, they're pushing this too far. And it worried me because this is my livelihood. This is something that I care about, that I've spent 20 years of my life working in. And it's something where I genuinely get upset. And, fortunately in the last few months, I've had opportunities to meet people at some of the big companies that haven't been into the shop in 10 years because they just assumed their whiskeys would keep selling at an inflated price every year forever. And they're like, what's going on? And it's an opportunity to finally be like, you've pushed it too far. So
it's a fine walk, when you're in the retail side. I remember years ago, Andrew, before I ever worked with you, for those that don't know, I've known Andrew for a very, very long time. And I had a whiskey blog going for a long time. At one point, it will be revived, I promise. All things whiskey. And I went on quite a vicious campaign for a while there with a lot of support from industry. It was in the Malt Whiskey Yearbook because of it and stuff. Campaigning against non-age state whiskey. It was at a time when it just kept coming and coming and coming and coming and getting worse and worse. And we were like, holy shit, like you are taking advantage of people so badly here. And I remember engaging with Andrew and we were messaging back and forth, riding home on the train one day. And the position he was in, like dialogue that we had back and forth, and him trying to be a retailer, keep things fair with margins and stuff, while knowing what's going on in the industry, knowing that if you speak out about too much of this kind of stuff, you run the risk of not getting the stuff on your shelves. You want to get on your shelves to give to them, right? So it's a hard line to walk, and I think Andrew has built a model here where we can speak freely enough without it seeming to come from a place of maliciousness, which I think is incredibly valuable. Criticism is important. I think whiskeys like tonight, where we can say, okay, this one doesn't work for me, this one does work for me. It's really indicative of the times we live in. We don't have to walk a line where everything has to be good for the consumer. We're allowed to have dissenting opinions sometimes, and it's a hard line to walk. I get it. Done an admirable.
Well, and Kurt, I think you take it back to like, I mean, and as you said, with retail, you do walk a bit of a fine line because you rely on the good grace of the producers and the importers to work with you, and you can't unreasonably or unfairly take shots at them. But I think not, as you said, not being able to question things, having to take things as they are, puts you in a position where you're not able to be honest with people, and people can like I'm going to pick on Macallan for a moment, not because I think their whiskeys are bad. They're not. Like we've included them in tastings over the last 3 years, like the 12 and the 18 sherry oak, and have to like begrudgingly admit how good those whiskeys are because they are still very, very good. But you have people come in the store, like I had a woman come in the store about 3 months ago who every year has bought her husband, an 18-year-old Macallan, every single year for like a decade. And she's like, I can't do it anymore. And trying to talk to them about and be like, I get it. Like the price is crazy. You could get 4 excellent bottles that are as good as that for that price. It's a good whiskey, but the pricing is crazy on it. And the sad thing is that I've been saying this at least to my staff and to people who would listen. I've been worried for about 4 or 5 years now that the Scotch whiskey industry is slaying the golden goose. And I think some of them have actually done it because, now all of a sudden they're scrambling to figure out how to sell their latest release for $140,000 or $250,000 and wondering why no one's buying it, let alone, their $500 18-year-old or their $800 18-year-old. I mean, that's where things got crazy.
And how do you walk those kind of prices and that kind of mentality backwards without making it look like it's a fire sale and your shit is falling apart?
Yeah, and then what do you do about the retailers that are sitting on stock of things that they've overpaid for now that you're just nuking the shit out of it? So interesting times ahead. What I can say on this is Kensington Wine Market is we're there for our customers. We search for value. I think we started to talk about this briefly during the tasting earlier, and I'm gonna end on this. I'm gonna stop this rant before it goes too far. But like we see value at different points, and Kurt talking about how that the Society Craigellachie for around $300 is a bit expensive, but it's good, and he gets it, and he can understand it. It's similar to how we look at everything. When we pick casks, it's not a dollars to age. That's not how we look at it. Is the whiskey good? Do we think we can sell it for the price? If we don't, we'll sometimes try to push back on the price. And if the price doesn't budge, we don't buy it. And, that's the approach we take to value. It's subjective. And, is the 13, or the 17 that much better? Is it 3 times better than the 17? Or the 13? No. But can you justify the price? And if you can, then it's a buy. And if you can't, it's not. And it's as simple as that. So, Kurt, thank you for a great tasting and some great conversation. Thanks everybody for taking part. Thanks for your tasting notes. Enjoy seeing some familiar names and faces for those to turn your cameras on. If you're one of those people who's afraid to turn your camera on during a tasting, we will not share your image or your whatever on the interweb. That's just for Kurt and I to see so that we know who we're talking to. So if you want to turn it on, we'd be grateful. But regardless, we appreciate you chiming in. Thanks for tuning in. I swear this cough is almost gone. Hopefully by Tuesday. Anyway, have a great night, everybody. We'll talk soon. Good night.